I don't really know exactly how I keep the information straight and don't like mix around the numbers or lose track of it. If it gets really complex, I'll lose track of it and have to start again sometimes. But as far as simple stuff, it just feels kind of like I throw it into a black box and then the answer pops out.
If you would like to support the efforts and research we are doing here on this podcast, please go to podcast.discoveringyourmind.com and become a monthly supporter. We greatly appreciate your support. Thank you. Aphantasia is a condition characterized by an inability to visualize mental images in one's mind. If you have just discovered that you or someone you love has aphantasia, or if you're just fascinated by the subject in general and love learning more about it, you are in the right place. The Discovering Your Mind podcast delves into all aspects of the mind's eye, including aphantasia, hyperphantasia, and everything in between. Welcome to the Discovering Your Mind podcast, brought to you by shanesbraindomain.com. I am your host, Shane Williams, also known as Shane's Brain. And today I have a co-host. My son, Cole Williams, will be joining us. And we are interviewing my nephew, the one and only Shane Miner. How you doing there, Shane?
Doing good. Hope I'm living up to your name all right.
I'm sure you are. Yes, Shane was named after me for some reason, and he loves it.
You can take it up with my mom.
All right, fantastic. Well, just to start out, Shane, why don't you tell everybody what you do for a living?
Yeah, I tint windows. I'm self-employed, so I'm in a bunch of other people's houses, making their life a little more comfortable.
Fantastic. You enjoy that?
Yeah, I love it. It's been great, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon.
Well, that is good to hear. It's always nice when you find your thing. Sounds like you found your thing.
Yeah, and I get basically winters off because nobody's worried about their windows being too hot in the winter, so I get a few months to just relax every year.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
That is.
I'm still doing jobs here and there, but it slows down a bunch in the winter.
All right. Very cool. What about your hobbies and interests? What do you like to do for fun and such?
I mean, most of my time's taken up with my wife and my kid, doing stuff for them and with them. And when I do get a minute to myself, I'm usually spending it at the gym, running, or I'm trying to get back into climbing. I kind of took a break.
All right. Cole, why don't you take it away here and get started? In this episode, we will be referring to what we call the Apple graph. If you would like to view the Apple graph to play along and better understand what we're talking about, you can find it on shanesbraindomain.com in the Aphantasia and Beyond section. If you are unable to view the Apple graph for whatever reason, it is a graph divided into 6 sections. In the number 6 section, there is a very detailed image of a red apple. In the number 5 section, it is the same image but with less detail. Number 4 is still in color but has less detail and more basic shapes instead of detailed hues and gradients. Number 3 is the less detailed apple but in gray tones without the color. Number 2 is a simple outline of the apple. And number 1 is blank, indicating no visualization whatsoever. This is called aphantasia.
We are going to start with the Apple graph. So if you can pull that up.
Yep.
Imagine a red apple in your mind. I think we kind of know the answer, but which one best represents what you saw in your mind's eye?
Yeah, I saw the inside of my eyelids.
Okay, so nothing.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you first discovered that you have aphantasia?
Sure, yeah. You come across it your whole life, you know. I remember back in elementary school them telling us to lay down on the floor in the gym and like they turned all the lights off and then they had us go through like this exercise where they were telling a story and we were supposed to imagine it. And, you know, when they did stuff like that, I was like, why in the world would they ever make anybody do this? This is so boring. Because I was just sitting there with my eyes closed and I'm a little kid. I want to be, playing. So I always knew there had to be something going on, but I didn't really think about it very much. I was just like, I guess this just helps some people for some reason. And like, you know, in high school, I'd be running track and my coach would tell me to visualize running like the perfect hurdles race, like as fast as I've ever gone, never hitting any of the hurdles, getting my stepping cadence perfect and stuff like that. And I listened to them because, you know, they were my coach telling me to do something. But, you know, when there's nothing there, it's sitting there thinking like, okay, I'm going to run over the hurdles. Okay, I'm not going to hit any of them. You know, it's just like a sequence of thoughts. Like there wasn't anything associated with it. So I didn't really see how that was going to help me run my race better. Tons of examples all through my life. People trying to help me by telling me to picture something and me wondering why it helped people. And I finally started to put it together when I was in college, because just like talking to people, I realized that like the way that they were describing their dreams, for example, like there was so much vivid detail. They had to have been physically seeing something. And I knew I couldn't do that. And so because I didn't know anything about it, I thought that like my brain was just broken and that like I had this like only me thing that nobody else was going through. For some reason, everybody else had this capacity to see things in their mind, and I couldn't even comprehend how to describe that being possible. How can you see something without seeing it? It made no sense to me. And then a few years later, I was watching a video on YouTube, actually, and this random guy who plays video games on the internet decided to start talking about how he can't picture things and how they just gave it a name not that long ago. It's called Aphantasia. And I was like, oh, shoot, there's other people like me. It's at least common enough that they gave a name to it. So, you know, I'm not like irreparably broken or something. It's not just me. So that's when I finally was able to put a name to the phenomenon. And then, you know, a couple of years after that, I heard that Shane had been looking into it for years. And all this time I could have known that I wasn't alone if I just talked to my uncle about it for half a second. So.
It's really interesting that you mentioned those visualization tactics that they use in elementary school and school sports that were supposed to help you, but really didn't for you. Because for me, those kinds of things really helped me in school. It was the exact opposite. So you're talking about maybe it's helping those people. I was one of those people that it really helped. Going back to that school experience, do you think that there's anything that could have helped you more than that visualization? Or is there anything else your teachers could have done better?
I think it was just something that didn't benefit me. I don't think I was missing something because they were trying to get people to visualize. I always did really well in school. It just wasn't a benefit for me. It wasn't necessarily a drawback.
All right. Shall we move on?
Sure.
Imagine a horse in your mind. Is it like looking at a picture or more of just a thought or something else?
It's more of a thought. I tried to put just like a generic horse together and I couldn't. So I thought about this horse that lives just down the road from us. We go on walks past their stable every once in a while.
Okay. So there's no image, but there is a thought of a specific horse.
Yeah.
Correct?
I can think of specific things. It's just up to whether or not I remember the details.
Is it in color or black and white?
I was trying to picture its color specifically. I was trying to come up with a color, and that's when I thought about the horse that we see. It's kind of like a reddish brown. I think it's a reddish brown. I don't know for sure, but I think I remember it being reddish brown.
Can you think about any like variations in the colors? If they're like bright colors or muted colors, is there any detail there?
Like I know that there are horses that are tan, so I could say that there could be a tan horse. Basically, I could give it any color that I know a horse can be or a color that I know exists, I guess. But that's just like me assigning that color to a thought. It's not like nothing is changing except for like the information that I'm giving to it.
Okay, great. Is there any difference with your eyes closed or your eyes open?
No, except that I might get slightly distracted by something I'm physically seeing with my eyes open.
Would you say that the thought is in your mind, or is it projected out in front of you?
I don't know if I can associate like a place with my mind. I mean, it's definitely not projected out in front of me. So I guess that means it has to be in my mind wherever that is located.
Right.
Okay.
The mysterious void, as I call it.
Yeah. Very similar experience for me.
All right. Can you determine if it's 2D or 3D?
Well, I was thinking of a real horse, so categorically it would have to be 3D.
Okay.
But dimensions don't apply to an abstract thought.
What about movement?
I didn't think of whether or not it was moving.
What about a background?
No. I could say that it lives next to the house of its owner and like there's a wood fence. I didn't think about any of that earlier.
Can you put a birthday hat on the horse if you want?
I mean, obviously, I could say there is a birthday hat on the horse now, but that's the extent of it.
Does anything other than saying that information, does anything about the thought change?
No, that's the only thing that changes.
If it made a sound, could you hear it in your mind?
No.
Okay. So this whole next section has to do with sequence visualization.
Okay.
Imagine a cup on a table that you accidentally knock over.
Okay.
What type of cup was it?
It was the cups that my son drinks out of. So just normal plastic cups.
Okay. What color was the cup?
The one he's been drinking out of lately is like a light green. So that's the one that I was thinking about.
Okay. What type of table was it?
The pull-out card table that we use for like puzzles or games or things like that.
What was the table made of and what color was the table?
The table's black and I think it's plastic all around. I think the legs are metal and the table's plastic. It's just a cheap folding table.
Okay. How did the cup get knocked over?
I was just thinking about a cup falling over, so I guess it would have gone by itself.
Okay. Interesting. When you knocked the cup over, did anything spill out of it?
No, I didn't think about anything being in it.
Okay. How did this sequence appear in your mind, I guess, as a video in your mind or something else?
It feels kind of like I don't give any details until they're required, and then I decide on them on the spot. I would try to get as much detail as I could in the few seconds that you asked me to picture it. There were some gaps and things I hadn't thought to think of yet. I mean, I knew I was going to get asked about details, so I tried to think of as many as I could. So I decided on the color and the table before I was asked, but I didn't decide on whether there was anything in it or not.
So I think this is an interesting difference to point out, because when I ask people that can visualize this question, the details just come, right? They visualize something and the details are just there. It sounded like you have to like consciously, okay, what are the details here? And it's much more effort based.
Yeah, my thoughts don't have any unnecessary detail. If I need there to be a color to what I'm thinking about, I pick what color I'm going to think about. I only put in as much detail as is necessary to solve whatever problem I'm facing. And then if I need more detail, I'll decide to add it in.
Random question on the side. Did you do well in math in high school?
Very well, yeah. So I was on an unofficial accelerated program in my public elementary school. My fourth grade teacher saw that I should not be in grade level math and put together a specific curriculum for me to do on her own time. And I followed that through until the end of elementary school when I switched school districts. But by the end of sixth grade, I was doing calculus.
Okay, because I find that really interesting, because a common conception about the difference between Fantasia and Aphantasia is this difference between like the logical brain and the creative brain. Like a lot of people think you need to have Aphantasia to be creative. And I find it really interesting to look at the difference between you and my dad, Shane.
Yeah.
Because he is, and pardon me for saying this, really bad at math. And so I find it very interesting that you both have very similar condition in having aphantasia, but he's a very creative brain. You know, he does
and
a lot.
I am not at all.
Things.
In case you were hesitant to assume, I am not very creative at all. I've always struggled with it.
Exactly. You have that more logarithmic algebra brain. And I find that very interesting that you both can have aphantasia, but have such stunning differences in what you can comprehend and formulate in your brain.
So when you're doing math, what's happening in your mind?
That's a good question. When I find out, I can give you a concrete answer. So ever since I can remember, it's just come naturally to me. Like one time specifically in 7th grade, my teacher thought I was cheating because I had done this accelerated program. I had already been through algebra. And then I got sent back to grade level math when I switched school districts. So it was like super easy for me. So what I would do is she had the homework assignment on the board when I got into class. And so I would open up to that page and I would write question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. And then I would sit there for the last like half an hour to 40 minutes of class after I finished the homework, waiting for it to be done. And then I would turn in my homework immediately. So she thought I was cheating because I was completely checked out all class long, and yet my homework was done before class was done. And when it comes to stuff like simple algebra, addition, multiplication, stuff that I learned back in elementary school, I've been doing it for so long, I don't even think about it. I just kind of know the answer.
All right. I'm weirded out, but that's all the questions I have on it.
Like most people, when they say that, when they hear that I'm good at doing math in my head, they automatically assume that I'm like writing down the problem in my head and like going through the steps to solve it out in my head when I say I do math in my head, but I can't see anything. So that's not what I'm doing. I don't really know exactly how I keep the information straight and don't like mix around the numbers or lose track of it. If it gets really complex, I'll lose track of it and have to start again sometimes. But as far as simple stuff, it just feels kind of like I throw it into a black box and then the answer pops out.
Imagine any room.
Any room. Okay. Give me a second. Okay.
Can you imagine all 4 walls at once?
No.
Can you imagine all 4 walls and all 4 corners at once?
No, I can't. I have to think about them in order, one at a time.
Can you zoom in to a small millimeter of space in the room?
Yes, if it's an identifiable object I can think about.
Okay. Can you describe that anymore? That's interesting.
Like I said earlier, I kind of generate the detail as I need it. So if there's a particularly distinct pattern in the texturing, I could remember that. Or an electrical outlet, I could like think about how close you would have to be to like only see the little socket. But it's not like being in the room and then like moving really close. It's just like, if I want to think about a very small area, I just start thinking about that thing.
Okay. Yeah, and those differences are coming out again here because it's very apparent that your mind thinks differently than mine does. More of a left brain type of thinking, more technical.
Yeah, that's interesting because I don't see how it could possibly be any harder to think about a very small section of a wall than to think about an apple or a horse, because those things are just functionally equivalent. They're just ideas in my mind. I can't relate to something being easier or harder to imagine in your mind. Like trying to make up a new creature, that seems infinitely harder to create something new than to just think about a smaller aspect of something I'm already thinking about.
Yeah. And for me, it's the complete opposite. My thoughts are so distant and vague that it's hard to even get them to go anywhere specific sometimes. But the creative part of it is like so much more fun to me. That's where my brain will go without trying. It's more of a default setting of let's goof around, let's have fun, right? That's where my brain goes. And so anytime I'm trying to make it do something that's not fun, it just refuses. Like it puts up a wall, you know? So I'm sitting here, I'm trying to think about a small area of space, and the same thing that happens when I try to think about math is happening in my mind. It's trying to get me not to. It's saying, why are we doing this? It's pointless. And it seems like your mind, Shane, is much more open and willing to do those kind of things. It's like, all right, yeah, let's think about this, and these are the details, and it more willingly goes there.
Yeah, and I find I'm very good at hyper fixating on a task if I need to as well. So like when I started tinting, a couple months into being on the job, I was one of the fastest guys on the crew. Like I picked up on the minute details of how to do things, and I've always focused heavily on optimizing processes and making things faster, smoother, more efficient, wasting less time, wasting less energy. It's really easy for my mind to focus on those kinds of things.
Interesting.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you left brain and right brain. Okay. So the next part is all about mind audio. Do you have an inner monologue?
No.
Okay, can you explain that to me? Because this is something I've always been curious about, is how can you not have an inner monologue? Like when you're thinking of things, what are you experiencing?
I'm just as curious as to how you can hear a voice inside your head. It's weird enough when they're hearing their own voice in their head. Like that's already surreal. But generating some random voice you've never heard before in your head, like how in the world does that work? I think because aphantasia is rare, language didn't develop to accurately describe how my mind works, because I'm always struggling to find words to describe what's going on. None of them quite sound right. It's kind of like my thoughts just exist or occur to me. There's just no words for it. I can't get there. Especially with sound. It's a tough one. I don't know if I'm capable of accurately describing the profound nothingness that my thoughts come out of. But somehow they do.
That blows my mind. So we know that there's nothing audible going on, but is there always some sort of thought going on in your mind? Does your mind ever shut up?
I'd say my default state is not thinking.
Okay. Once again.
So yeah, like I generate thoughts when I need them or when they're useful. The vast majority of the time I'm thinking about nothing. And it drives my wife nuts.
Well, yeah, it's something those of us that can visualize and have this going on, it's something that we're jealous of, because we wish that for just 5 seconds our mind would shut up.
Yeah, so I listen to a lot of podcasts, music, videos. I feel like I've always got something in my ear because it is so easy for me to tune to zero that I actually want more. And so I find myself listening to a lot of stuff so I can have something going on.
What about you, Dad? Is that similar for you?
Yes. That's where we're very similar. It just kind of happens naturally, especially if I want it to.
It's really easy for me to think about nothing. But if I try and think about nothing, I just end up thinking about nothing.
What does the phrase, I have a song stuck in my head, mean to you? What is it like?
Okay, most people are going to be surprised to learn that I do, in fact, get songs stuck in my head. It's without sound, how in the world does that work? Closest I can come to it is if a song is stuck in my head, it's like an impulse to sing that song. Like I want to sing whatever I would label as being stuck in my head, or I end up actually singing it.
Okay, do the lyrics go through your head? in any way? I'm just trying to understand.
Oh, like I can remember the lyrics. Even the phrasing going through my head is problematic because like
Okay.
I can't assign a space to where my thoughts are at all. So even that phrase makes no sense to me.
That's very interesting. Very interesting.
All right, now we're going to talk about some of the other senses. So imagine a nice, juicy steak in your mind, and tell me if you can smell it in your mind.
No. I can kind of think about what something should smell like. It's a lot harder to put words to smells, though.
Can you taste it in your mind?
No.
What about touch? Can you experience reaching out and feeling it, touching it?
No.
In this episode, we will be referring to what we call the nature picture. If you would like to view the nature picture to play along and better understand what we're talking about, you can find it on shanesbraindomain.com in the Aphantasia and Beyond section. If you are unable to take a look at the nature picture, it is a picture of a grove of tall trees with the sun shining brightly through the trees. There is a blue camping chair next to a peaceful flowing river with a campfire nearby.
Do you have that nature picture that I sent you,
Yeah.
Andy? So can you put yourself in that picture?
Not even a little bit. How would one begin to put themselves into a picture?
I'm with you there. That was my response too.
When people talk about it, they're like sitting in the chair. Even weirder than that is like looking at themselves from like a third person perspective from behind or something like that. Like how in the world do you, like I never see the back of myself. I don't know what I look like back there. How do you generate that? No, I can't put myself in the picture, not even a little bit. I can like vaguely think of being in a forest sitting in a blue chair.
Are there any of those senses that you feel like are stronger or more prominent in your way?
If there's language that's been developed to describe things accurately, it helps me. Colors are really well defined. So if you tell me a color something is, like that color has a specific value. You can recreate it by mixing certain ratios of other colors or by typing in the correct hex code into a computer. They're consistent, they're well defined. So like people being able to see a picture is easier for me to understand than people hearing or touching or tasting in their brain, because those things are a lot more ambiguously defined.
Read the book that inspired this podcast, Aphantasia and Beyond, available on shanesbraindomain.com and Amazon.
In general, when you close your eyes, what do you see?
The inside of my eyelids.
Okay. Does your ability to, like, I guess, imagine details, imagine items or thoughts, does that vary depending on circumstances, details, or events?
Yeah. I think the funniest example is it took me about 8 years to remember my wife's eye color. For some reason, I just could not lock that one away and bring it back. And like after like 3 or 4 years of her saying, yes, all of us have the same eye color, Shane. You, me, and Desmond, we all have the same eye color. It finally like clicked. And now I remember we all have that same eye color. You know, before we were even dating, one time I was with my wife and she had to stop by the bank and she read out her bank account number off of like a check or something because she couldn't remember her bank account number and she needed to get access to her account. So she had to read it off of something. And I still remember that bank account number. I never saw it written on anything. I just heard her say it once. And we haven't used that account in years. And I still remember that bank account. Like, it just, I don't know why I remember some things and why some things are so hard. It's a complete mystery to me.
That is bizarre to me. Really cool, but bizarre.
How would you say your relationship with numbers are? Is it like a love affair? Are you like Like I've heard I've interviewed other people. A friend of mine said, to me, numbers aren't sexy. So I have to force my mind to go there. But it sounds like maybe with you, they are sexy. How would you describe them?
I've seen some pretty sexy equations in my day. No, I think it's just because they've always come so naturally to me. I understood the concept of millions and billions before I started kindergarten, but I didn't read my first books cover to cover until first grade. I just like numbers. They've always made sense. I've always understood them. I like things that are well-defined and reliable. Language can be messy. It can mean different things to different people. But as long as we're working in base 10, 2 plus 2 is always going to be 4,
Right.
So I like that absolute concrete finality to how numbers are always the same and they always work. And so I've just always been drawn to numbers. I've always liked them. So yeah, I do find remembering numbers relatively easy. Like I window tint, and so I have to cut patterns to size on the glass for, let's say, an entire house or an entire south-facing wall of an office building. And often I'll find that I can remember the entire cut list for the whole job while I'm cutting film off the roll. I can remember how many of what different sizes I need to cut. And then I can remember what ones I've already cut and what ones I haven't. Remembering my cut list helps me work faster. So I remember my cut list. So I don't have to keep referencing a sheet to see what I've done and marking off what I've done. I can just do it.
Okay. And I guess on that similar note, remembering your wife's eye color doesn't come up frequently in everyday life as like a utility thing. So maybe that's why it was a little bit more difficult. So in your own way, would you say you tend to visualize things you've seen before, or do you tend to create new and unique images in your head?
Definitely things I've seen before. And
so
when I'm trying to visualize something, I'm pulling up details that I know, so I had to have learned them at some point.
Okay, let's talk about reading.
Okay.
When you read a novel, is it like a movie in your mind or something else?
No, nothing. Like I know how to read, so I read the words on the page. I can understand what they mean because I know what words mean.
Do you think about what the characters look like or sound like or anything like that?
No. In fact, I often find it annoying the amount that authors go into detail about the character's appearance. It just feels like a waste of time.
What about audiobooks? Do you like those, or is there any different experience with those?
No, audiobooks are really similar. I'm not a big fan of reading, and audiobooks don't help. I think it's just format in general. Like the way that books are written just doesn't work well with how my brain works. I didn't put together that people saying the book was better than the movie being an Aphantasia thing until like years after I knew what Aphantasia was. I was like, oh, it's because like they're making the version that they want it to be, and then it's not the same. That makes sense. But I never imagined that people were like creating this canon depiction of what the character should be in their mind, and they're disappointed if that doesn't come out in the screen. I like watching the movie. It takes a lot less time.
Okay, let's talk about sleep and dreams. What do you do to fall asleep?
Most of the time, I am watching a YouTube video when I fall asleep.
Okay, that's interesting because so do I, but I'm a visualizer.
Yeah.
So what do you find helps you about YouTube videos?
If I'm laying down and I have a video in my ear, I know that I'm falling asleep. And then I just do. That's probably part of it. I think I started it just because I used to take a really long time to fall asleep. I had a lot of issues falling asleep. And so I would get bored because my brain was so quiet while I was trying to fall asleep. And I would just be laying in bed, not thinking about anything for like an hour.
Okay. So it seems like we do it for pretty much the opposite reasons. You talked about you watch them because your mind is so quiet that you almost get bored trying to fall asleep. I watch YouTube videos because there's so much going on in my mind, and watching YouTube videos helps me hyper focus on something long enough that my brain's not putting in enough effort and it can finally settle down. I find that very interesting that we have like a similar behavior for completely different reasons.
Yeah.
What does the phrase counting sheep mean to you? And what's that like?
I think when I first heard the phrase that night, I tried to count sheep to fall asleep. And I was like, that doesn't work. I can't think about counting the numbers and counting sheep at the same exact time. So I had to like cycle back and forth between thinking about a sheep and thinking about counting, to like count one number, think of a sheep, count one number, think of a sheep. So I was switching back and forth a lot. I was probably switching back between thinking between those two things like multiple times a second. And so that didn't really help with the trying to fall asleep thing. So I was like, well, that might work for some people. It doesn't work for me.
How vivid and detailed are your dreams?
I don't dream.
You don't dream?
I've had a handful of dreams in my life. Yeah. I go to bed and then I wake up and there's almost never anything that happens in between.
I'm sorry, I got to take a moment to comprehend this, that you don't dream.
So I have had a few dreams, so I know I'm capable of having a dream. At least I think I've had dreams. That when I describe them to people, they sure seem to think that I had a dream. So we're going to go with the label of dream to describe what has happened to me a handful of times. But I don't get images when I dream either. So it's not like a full dream if it is a dream.
Can you describe to us just that handful of times, like what you can remember that being like?
Yeah. It's like, I know what happened. I know how I felt when it happened, because the few dreams I can remember, they've all been nightmares. Most of them when I was young. I think I've had one dream since turning 18 and I'm 30 now. And that was also a nightmare. Like, I can remember how I felt. I can remember how scary it was. I can remember details. If I tried to put any visual detail to it, like what color was X, how big was Y, things like that, I would just be making up those details. There weren't any associated with the dream when I had it. For the ages that I had them, they were like extremely traumatic, graphic type of dreams. Very, very horrific in the details that were remembered, because there was such strong negative emotion attached to them. It's easy for me to remember them. I've had a handful of dreams, and I've had each of them multiple times, except for the one I had as an adult, which I only had once. But the ones I had as a kid, I had them multiple times before I stopped having them. So the details probably got more refined as I continued remembering them and thinking about them while I slept. How I would describe it is it's more of just like I was thinking about these things happening while I was asleep. I don't dream, but occasionally I'll be aware of thoughts that I've had while I was asleep. And the main distinction between those and what I would consider a dream is like how realistic they are. So like, I think about something that's like actually literally happening in my life. Occasionally I'll think about something while I'm sleeping, like what I need to do the next day. I'll like mentally run through a thought of like the checklist of the things I need to do in my day, and I'll be aware that I did that while I was asleep. That will happen on occasion. Most of the time I just go to bed and then I wake up and there's nothing in between.
And we do differ in this area as well. I'm pretty sure that I dream every night on some level. Identifying how those dreams are manifesting is a lot harder for me. I know that I dream, but explaining how it was manifesting itself in my mind is difficult for me. Mm-hmm. I've just recently decided that I do sometimes see images in my dreams, but beyond that, I can't really put my finger on them, but I know I have them.
Yeah. I don't think it's possible to have more aphantasia than I do. So.
All right, we're going to talk about memory. If you want to recall a memory, can you see it in your mind?
No.
Are there any emotions attached to your memories? And if you can, just describe what your memories are like.
I do remember how I felt in situations that I can remember. And oftentimes, a strong emotion being associated with a memory will improve how much I can remember it and how long it sticks around. I can't recreate the emotions in real time. So it's more like I've filed away, this was scary, this was, I felt happy, I felt loved, I felt sad. I can somewhat feel the emotions when I'm remembering something, but it's much more muted, abstract, distanced from my own personal experience. I know it's not as strong as when I felt it originally, for sure.
Does it ever feel like you're experiencing the memory all over again, or more like you're just observing it?
No. The only thing I could say that I experience while I'm thinking about a memory is that muted version of the emotion. I can feel some of the emotion.
Do you experience your memories in first person, third person, or both, or neither?
Neither is probably the most accurate, I would say. And the least accurate is definitely in third person. I do not understand how you could possibly experience a memory in third person. That makes absolutely no sense. I could see first person because obviously you lived through it, so you had a first person experience. But being able to like take that exact situation and then just like blow yourself out of it into third person is entirely incomprehensible.
This is so weird for me because for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm in the minority with you two, with Aphantasia talking to you two, and you're like, how is this possible? Like, what is that even like? And usually it's multiple of us people that can visualize asking my dad, what's that like? You know, I feel like a minority in this for the first time ever. And it's very weird.
Yeah, it is kind of nice to have to have somebody who gets it.
Yeah. Even with the differences, you can understand what I'm trying to say better than basically anyone else.
All right. This is all about mind storage. How would you describe how your mind stores information?
I do my darndest to memorize something, and then I hope it comes back when I need it.
Okay.
I can't understand the concept of having a space for your mind. The entire idea that like you put what you remember somewhere is hard to wrestle with, because I don't feel like I put my thoughts or my memories or anything I think about anywhere.
Okay, and this is something I want to kind of apply to, maybe I'm the only person who experiences this, because I don't have like a way that my mind stores information, like an area or space either. But I can feel thoughts in my brain. And if, people have listened to my interview with my dad, I talk about how I'm very sensory, like my strongest sense in my brain is touch. So how I store information is I can feel thoughts and different sensations coming from different areas of my brain.
So that would be so cool if you were like physically feeling where you stored it in your synapses as it fires. That would be so cool.
And it is something similar to that, where I can feel where thoughts are coming from in my brain. And I'm just wondering if, like, when you imagine, like, if you're thinking, this is kind of meta thinking, but like thinking about your thoughts, can you think about them like coming from your brain, or is it just like a vast void of everything? Like they're not coming from anywhere in particular.
Even using the word void doesn't feel right, but using the word vast void definitely feels wrong, because that implies that there's like a large space for it to inhabit. Void is probably the closest word we've got to it, but I definitely wouldn't call the void large, because
I call it mysterious.
Indeterminate. It's an indeterminate void.
Okay. I'm going to try to wrap my mind around that for the next week or so.
But yeah, back to the synapses firing. When you remember something, does it feel in the same spot in your brain every single time, or can it move?
Everything comes from a general area in my brain, like sound, like audio memory usually comes from a certain part of my brain. Sensory memory usually comes from the center. Visual memories come from the forehead. And it all kind of just like compiles together to make whatever experience I'm having.
Yeah, that tracks with you actually being able to physically feel your synapses fire. That's cool.
Yeah, okay. I can feel my brain.
Okay. Well, that's why I wanted to come on. I'm curious about this stuff too, you know?
So if I were to say the phrase search your mind, what does that mean to you? What is that like?
Try harder to remember.
And that's it.
Yeah.
How would you describe like trying harder to remember? Is it just like focusing more?
Yeah,
or is it something
basically.
else?
Yeah. The only thing I know to do to try harder to remember something is to just focus on it more, to put more attention into the thought of finding whatever it is I need to find. It doesn't work basically ever. If I don't pull something up right away, I'm probably not going to be able to remember it. You know, occasionally I can dig something out that I don't remember basically immediately, but that's pretty rare.
So things like that bank account number, how is that getting stored with virtually no effort, where other things you've got to focus and try?
I don't know, because that number hasn't been relevant or useful for years. And I still, like, anytime I think about it, I can pull it right up. Some things are effortless. Some things are really hard. If I care about the information, I'll retain it a lot better.
We've already touched on how you use your mind in your career. Is there anything else you want to say about that? How either your visualization or lack thereof affects how you perform in your career and your hobbies in school?
Let's say I'm tinting a really oddly shaped window, which does happen on occasion. Like, I've had tilted trapezoids, and I'm trying to cut the pattern out on the ground so it will be a relatively close fit to the window, and then I can cut it exact once I've got it installed. But if there's too much extra hanging off in different places, it makes it a lot harder to install, and more likely you'll ruin the film while you're trying to. So you have to get it close to right. And then you do that on the ground, you roll it up, you clean the window, and then you unroll it while you're laying it onto the glass. So you have to be able to take what the window is like, turn it whatever way needs to happen so that the protective liner is going to be facing the glass, and then cut the pattern on the ground the appropriate way. And if it's like really complex, I'll have to like do it piecewise. So I'll have to decide which side of the film is going to taper, and I'll have to work through all of that. And then I'll have to decide, okay, and then it's going to be, you know, at this angle over here. And then I'll have to take that angle by itself, manipulate it into what it's supposed to be. And then I know what I need to do for that piece.
So you feel like if you could visualize, that whole process would be easier?
I feel like it would have to be. Flip it around, flip it again upside down, and then just like trace it. Like, that seems like that would be so much easier than what I have to do. One thing we didn't really go into, I guess it's poorly defined as intelligence, known as like spatial intelligence or spatial awareness, where, like, you know, some people are better at packing a car full of luggage, or filling a moving truck without extra space, or, you know, like there's those little puzzles where you have to put like oddly shaped pieces and get them to fit into a specific space or a specific shape.
Or like Tetris.
Yeah. There's a lots of examples where you can take some physical object and then you rotate it, or you manipulate it around, you put it into a space that you're not currently in, retain the appropriate dimensions. I've actually always been relatively good at that, which is, it seems to make no sense to me because I'm not actually visualizing anything. So.
Okay. And that actually has some scientific ground to it in modern cognitive psychology research. It tells us that it's very possible that spatial reasoning is completely separate from our ideas of any other sense. In fact, it might be a sixth sense all to its own, is this spatial reasoning. So it actually makes sense that even though you can't visualize, that you might have a strong spatial sense in your mind.
If I've seen a complete object, I can think about rotating it 30 degrees X, 45 degrees Z, and then lifting it like 2 units Y. I can think about what that would do to the object without any reference image.
See, again, where your mind's going to the technical aspect of it, like, because before you said that, I was relating, right? because to me, it's reality. Like, that's what I try to explain to people. Like, I don't do it in my mind. When I'm designing, I can design because it's in front of me. I put it up on my screen. I can see what I'm doing. And with packing a car, it's the same experience for me. Like, I'm there. This is real, and I've got to get this stuff in here, right?
Yeah.
But I don't do it so much in the technical way like you're describing. I do it just more in kind of a free thinking kind of way. Is this thing going to fit in there? And I don't always know until I try. Right?
Yeah.
So if you were to try to give a general description of how your mind works and what you see in your mind's eye, how would you describe it?
Complete and utter nothingness is how I describe my mind's eye. There is absolutely nothing going on in there that I can remotely relate to a sense that I have in the real world. How my mind works, it's very goal-oriented, very detail-oriented, very sequential. I go through the steps to accomplish a task that I've decided I want to get done. Emotions are just like a whole other, like, it's almost like a second brain that deals with emotions because they're so much more vague and imprecise. It's really hard for me to incorporate that information into what I'm experiencing in real time. I have to really work at it to really know exactly what's going on.
So if you could wave a magic wand and get rid of your aphantasia, would you do it?
No, I don't think I would.
Okay, why not?
I think it's so ingrained into my life experience that I couldn't imagine being the same person that I am if I could visualize things. And I've put in a lot of effort to try and turn myself into a person I can be proud of. And I think that I've done a reasonably good job for the point I'm at in my life. Obviously, I'm going to continue trying to be better, but I don't want to erase myself. I want to be me. So I think even with the issues it's presented, it also comes with some benefits. And so
what are the benefits and what are the issues?
Being able to quiet my mind, I feel like having constant thoughts would be terrible. I think it has given me space to develop that process-oriented efficiency that has helped me a lot in my chosen profession. I think it gives me a perspective that can provide very unique input into difficult situations. I feel like it's easier for me to step back from a difficult situation, take a breath, reevaluate, and then come back at it again more objective. I think it makes a lot of things harder, but things being harder isn't necessarily always bad either. I've had to come up with some pretty creative ways to solve problems that if I were visual, I would just think about what needed to happen and then that would take care of it. I actually think it's helped my memory because when something's important, I have to put in a lot of effort to, I focus a lot on remembering specific details. And so I think if the memory just happens automatically, it could get corrupted more. Like it will change more from what actually happened, where I'm remembering specific details in a more abstract manner. And so I feel like it might make those memories more reliable to what actually happened or what I actually experienced.
All right. That was beautiful, actually. That was pretty profound.
Yeah.
All right. That is it. Is there anything else either one of you would like to say before we sign off?
Good luck in your strange little world. I don't get it, but I'm glad you have it.
Yeah, I think even among aphantasia, because mine is so profound, it's led to some interesting quirks.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for this. It was a good experience. I learned a lot, and it was fun.
That was fun.
Yep.
All right. Take care. Have a great day.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, follow, and engage with us, and share it with your friends and family as we continue to explore this fascinating subject. For additional information about this episode or Shane's Brain, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Discovering Your Mind podcast. You are beautifully unique.